Hi, I'm Victoria Aveyard. I am a young adult fantasy author, and I am talking about the end of my Realmbreaker trilogy, Fatebreaker. Realmbreaker is a story of what happens when the heroes fail, when the heroes set out to save the world and can't get it done. So the criminals and the misfits have to do it for them. I like to ask the question, who's sort of the B team of saving the world? And we get it answered in this book. So, after I finished my first book series, the Red Queen series, I was in a really privileged position because that series had such a wide following. I had so many readers, and my publisher was asking me what I wanted to write next. They don't always ask that question. And so I started off by thinking of what I wanted to read when I was a teenager. What was I looking for? And I remember I was writing a lot of fan fiction for The Lord of the Rings, and most of it was because I always wanted to be part of The Lord of the Rings, but there were no girls in the Fellowship. So I jumped off from that point of maybe I can scratch that itch, maybe I can write my sort of version of that story. And that's where the first idea came from, of building my version of the Fellowship, of the not so good guys and the reluctant chosen one and a lot more women on the team. And that's how I built Realmbreaker. She's a great character in that she starts in a very specific place. She's very cynical, she's very independent, and she doesn't really believe in this call to action, this you're the chosen one, you're the hero, you're going to save the world. She only goes along with it for her own selfish means. And over the course of the first two books, sort of starts to believe in herself, believe in the world, believe in this group of companions that she is building that is becoming this family. So she's a little less, alone. And then by the end of the second book, she loses them all for reasons I can't say unless you've read the book. So we find her at the beginning of the last book all alone again, and we've taken away everything that she's sort of earned in the first two books. And I find that to be the most interesting place you can put a character, is get them to the place where they have built themselves up and made their sort of changes, and now we've kind of brought them back to the beginning, and then we see how they react in a different way now. So she's on her own again and has to rely on herself, not the people around her. It's both really, really fun because I love the world building aspect of it. I love the big world, but you also have to kind of keep these things straight. And luckily, I have copy editors who create a Bible for me. So I remember, I described this character as having blue eyes here, so I better do it again there. So those little discrepancies are great. I find that knowing the characters super, super well helps me know the world even better. So the characters in this book were so clearly defined in my head from the very beginning. So that wasn't so much a challenge of keeping things straight, at least with where they were concerned. Because sometimes your characters can start to sound like each other, especially when you're writing in different perspectives, but these ones, at least I never had to deal with that. Yeah, so it's sometimes people will ask, choose your favorite character, and it's like asking a parent to choose their favorite child, but all parents do actually have favorite children. So in this series, I definitely gravitate towards the assassin character. Her name is Sarasa because she's the most morally gray of the heroes and also the most realistic. And so I get to be very funny through her in this unrealistic fantasy world and poke at the things that you would normally find ridiculous and sort of allow you through this character to make the audience believe it a little bit more, because she's making these realistic choices in a very unrealistic world, and we don't see that as often. I also really love the female villain in this story, who you start off thinking she's one thing, and then she's very clearly not by the end of the first book. I got to get out a lot of female rage through her, and I also love creating villains that a reader can think, I don't agree with what they're doing, but I understand where they're coming from. I think those are the best villains, the ones where you understand how they got to the point that they were at. And I love putting readers in that sort of ethical conundrum of, I don't condone it, but I understand it, and maybe I am rooting for them a little bit. So fantasy, everyone will say this is a little bit of a way to sugarcoat the pill. You can be a little bit preachier. You can talk about issues in a different way because you get to dress it up as something else. I always find it really interesting when I have readers who tell me, oh, your books are either too political or I don't think about politics at all within my books. And you think, every book is political, especially the fantasy ones. That's where we're drawing all of this inspiration from. But I love writing fantasy because I love the world building. I love the control that it gives me. That's always something I'm attracted to. But I do love being able to talk about things that are important to me within the vehicle of a story where it's not necessarily bashing you over the head with it. And I think those are the stories that are most effective in changing people's minds too. That's never the goal that I set out to have. I don't know if that's my place to be, but I think that is how you connect to people who might not necessarily understand what you're saying in a different way. It's really cool because writing is such a solitary profession. We are, for the most part, alone in our little caves, writing our books with made-up people in our heads. And you don't usually get to connect to the people who are on the other side of the book. You think about them a little bit, but you never really know how your work is going to reach them. And then you go on a book tour and you actually get to see it in person, and you get to see readers and you get to meet them, and you get to, at least for me, I loved books growing up, and I remember how much so many of these books meant to me, and then to know that I get to be part of that for someone else is a really cool experience. And then, of course, online, some authors aren't very present online. I am. I'm probably a little too present online, but I find that it's also really gratifying to get to connect to readers in that way, and not just to see them read my books, but to answer their questions about the industry, about publishing, about writing, about my craft, and just getting to have more of a back and forth dialogue that I really don't get to do when it's a tour.